Okay, so we're live with Jeff Jewitt. Jeff, this is probably the second time we're trying this, but we'll get it to work this time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here and speaking to you from, well, speaking long distance, it's an awful long way, but it's amazing. 12 hours time difference, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see, what's new? Well, the weather's turned a little bit, okay? So it's now not quite so cold and dry, so I've been able to do like bracing of tops and back, which I can't do when the humidity is really extreme. I can't do it in August and when it's up very high, and I can't do it in January and February when it's really low. So it just hit the sweet spot, which is 40 to 45%. Let's see. I'm working on a unusual guitar for me. It's kind of a first. It's a copy of 1935 Nick Lucas 14 fret. Now, the Nick Lucas guitars that you'll see, either original or copies, are all like from a little bit earlier period, and they're basically just kind of an LOO sort of body style, and a lot of them have 13 fret nets and things like that. Well, this particular one is a LOO. It's like a normal size fretboard. Soundboard, but the body is just huge. It's like 4 3/4 at the tail, tapering only to 4 1/4 at the neck, which is very unusual to have that little taper. So it's going to be interesting, and I've been tapping it all weekend and trying to figure out, and it's going to have a big sound. I mean, there's a lot of bass in there for sure, but I think people will smooth it out. I really do, so it doesn't get quite too boomy or whatever. I did the inlays today, and now I don't do a lot of inlay work, but boy, I tell you, that was that took all day. That was kind of fun in a way, but it's very tight work, and it's when you're inlaying those complicated inlays into rosewood, you have to be pretty careful because you don't have the luxury of just smearing CA glue and ebony dust in it to fill it. You got to be a little bit more careful. But yeah, I'm hoping I epoxy them in because I actually epoxy them in with an epoxy that's tinted to the exact color of fingerboard, so it looks. And so we'll see when I sand it off tomorrow. But yeah, I'm excited to get that. And so the fretboard's done, the neck is done. So I get the fretboard attached to the neck, I can carve the neck, basically hits off to the spray room. Right. And that I think that's going to be a good guitar. And then let's see, what else am I working on? Well, let's see. I'm trying to figure out exactly kind of, I've got some guitars that I've sent off to some prospective dealers, and they're more of an upper end guitar. They're fingerstyle guitars.
Right.
And I think they'll do well. So I'm not sure if I'm going to kind of build a couple more of those, but I do want to experiment. I've never done an arm bevel. I want to do that, and I tend to personally prefer the Florentine cutaway, but I want to do a Venetian cutaway. Okay. And so I think I'm going to incorporate that.
The pointy one, right?
Yeah, the non-pointy one. I really like the aesthetics of the pointy one. There's because of what you can do with the binding and the mitering, it just looks really. But you have to kind of be a jack of all trades when you do this. So everybody's tastes are different. So anyways, as I said, the weather's changed. So we're now kind of getting into spring a little bit, and so things are looking up. Things are doing good.
Great. And I mean, speaking of spray booths, I know that you're very well known for your finishes, especially and the color tints. I guess maybe now is a good time just to see what system you're using and how you like it.
Well, my background is, of course, I started in Ep3 in the late 80s, and it never really took off the way that I was hoping that it would. So I started supplementing the income of that by repairing furniture and doing furniture refinishing and repairs, which is things that I had done previously. And that business really took off, and I did really well with it. So for quite a number of years, I ran a refinishing shop. So I had the good fortune to be able to install a very good spray booth about, I want to say 20 years ago, maybe 22 years ago. And it's a big booth. It's a big, like 8x12 booth, and it's got ventilation that goes outside with all the right filtration. It's all to code. It's all sprayed. Safety wise, it's just it's top notch. And so I can spray really year round, but the finishes that I spray really do require a good booth, because I don't spray water based. I spray mostly 2-component catalyzed finishes, and it's not something that you really want to spray in a basement or a garage or anything like that. So, the focus that I've really done for guitars that I've settled on are good durable finishes. Now, strangely enough, for this Nick Lucas that I'm going to do, I'm going to be doing a lacquer finish on that. I think that's appropriate for that because it is more of a vintage kind of. I'm trying to copy a 1935. So I figured I'll do a lacquer finish on that, just because it will write and be period and all that kind of stuff. And most of the time I do spray hazardous stuff, so I have to have that booth.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt you there. I know some people use the term lacquer differently. Maybe I can just sort of clarify a little bit, because for some of us, like, lacquer is like nitrocellulose, or for other people, lacquer may mean something else. I just wondering if there was any sort of agreed upon terminology for these, for these terms.
Strangely enough, the term lacquer, okay, is an old word, and the original use of lacquer, it's the suffix lac, L-A-C, is comes from a Sanskrit word, lakh, L-A-K-H, which means 100,000. And what that refers to is, the original is shellac, the shellac resin, and it comes from insects, and refers to basically how many insects would have to be used if you want to, or to get like a usable amount of resin. Over the term, over the years, lacquers meant a lot of different things, but when it's used today, at least in the musical instrument industry, it usually refers to nitrocellulose lacquer, a solvent-based lacquer that ends with lacquer thinner, dries very fast, dries hard, polishes to a beautiful gloss, can be repaired easily, ages beautifully, looks nice. It just has a lot of good things going for it. Now, there is also a term that's used, at least here in the United States, we call water-based lacquer. It's nothing like nitrocellulose. It's not based on anything based like close to nitrocellulose. It's actually an acrylic resin, but it's a different animal completely. Now, overseas in different countries, lacquer is used a little bit differently. You may hear of things called conversion lacquer. Conversion lacquer is kind of like a nitrocellulose lacquer that's mixed with some other more durable resins, that require mixing before you use it, and it forms a much tougher film or harder film, more durable film than just nitrocellulose lacquer. But at least today, in the music instrument business, when we say lacquer, most people at least think of nitrocellulose lacquer. That's
Right.
what it's.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Because
now, I don't know overseas, at least in Asia,
right.
Lacquer, it may, be something a little bit different. I'm not really aware. There are some very, very unique finishes that have come out of places like Japan and China, and other things that are very old and very historical, but they're not really used in the musical instrument business.
Okay, thank you. Because I think as someone who's played quite a few guitars, whenever somebody tells me about a finish, I tend to prefer to delve down a little bit deeper, because we hear a lot of terms being used. So lacquer is one of them. And to me, at least previously, it didn't always mean nitrocellulose. Oh, hang on. Yeah, okay, sorry. I think we froze for half a second there.
I noticed it.
Yeah, and the other term I think that is used a lot, another two terms is varnish and and oil, like an oil finish.
Okay, varnish actually comes to us from an old, I believe it's a Latin word, verniz, V-R-N-I-Z. That is the root etymology of the term. And that is a term that means like amber. The amber, what you would call amber, the fossilized tree resin or whatever. Anyways, way back when, this was about in the 1500s, maybe the 1600s, the first oil-based varnish was invented. And it was made by taking amber and heating it till it melted, and then mixing it with hot linseed oil. And that was the origins of the term varnish. Now, varnish, when it's used, at least in the old sense, or I want to say the correct sense, does refer to a finish based upon a drying oil, like linseed oil or tongue oil, that cures by reacting with oxygen in the air. So it really can be thought of as a catalyzed finish or a reactive finish, because it requires air to cure it properly. Now, once again, varnish has been co-opted, and it has been used to refer to some different type of products that are newer products. And the reason that is done is because people that market new products want to be able to give people that are going to buy the product a frame of reference to purchase the product. So you may hear things, I've heard of water-based varnish. You will also hear of conversion varnish. Conversion varnish is a big, was and maybe still big, but it's very big here in the United States to finish things like kitchen cabinets or things that require a very durable finish. But varnish in the strict sense, in the old sense, refers to a drying oil, and a more modern formulation of varnish as synthetic resins became available. There was a synthetic resin that became available called urethane, and we call that polyurethane oil-based varnish or whatever.
Okay, thank you. Very, sometimes it can be quite confusing.
Well, it is, and it's even confusing to people that have a background in it, such as myself. But we run into what I want to say bad nomenclature all the time, referring to finishes. But the main finishes, just so you know, that are used in the musical instrument business are, if people still want to do it, French polish, which is based on shellac. And there again, you have that lac suffix, LAC. You have nitrocellulose lacquer, which we already talked about, which is generically referred to as lacquer, or more probably we should just call it solvent lacquer. You have some very few people using varnish. Now, varnish, oil-based varnishes were used up until about the late 1920s by both Gibson and Martin. And those were used on their high-end guitars. The lower-end guitars were finished with shellac. But when lacquer came out in the 30s, it just wiped out all of everything, and just everything became lacquer. The other finish that's very popular for the musical instrument business, or that's used, is what we call a urethane or a catalyzed urethane finish, which is what I use. And it's a very similar finish to what's put on a automotive or a car. It's very tough, it's very durable, it's clear, it polishes well. Some people don't like the look of it. If it's not applied correctly, it can look thick and plastic, which is, you have to be careful when you use it. And then another finish that you will hear referred to is called polyester. Polyester became very famous in the 60s and the 70s when the Asian markets started importing guitars into the United States at a big rate, like Takamine and Epiphone Asia. They finished all their guitars in polyester because it's very quick. You can basically polish it after it dries for a day, and it doesn't require a lot of spray coats to get a good thick build. But that's kind of the finishes that are used. I don't know very many people that use water-based finishes, except for novices or people that, like amateurs will use it. But I don't know of any big guitar companies that do.
Right, and now there's a UV cured finish as well.
Then we have a UV finish, which is very similar to polyester in terms of its chemistry, and the two-component urethane finish that I spoke about. And that's eventually something that I will probably go into at some point. It requires a sizable investment in equipment.
Right. Yeah, I have to say I have a personal dislike for UV finishes because of all the major problems on my guitars, at least, have come from UV finishes. They have
you've done in UV finishes, or have you put
guitars have come in with UV finishes, and I suspect it's because they don't cure well between the coats. So
what sort of problems? I'm just curious.
Delamination.
Yes. Okay. So that is caused by the biggest problem, and Taylor went through this in the 90s when they first came out with UV cure. Tacoma guitar, same thing. The problem is that the sealer or the product that they use to fill the grain, okay, UV finish, they were trying to cure that. And the problem that they finally find out was that there was a shadow that was caused by the whiskers of wood coming up from the grain raising, from the initial coat of finish. They formed a little shadow, and they prevented proper curing of the UV. The light couldn't get in, properly cure that bottom first initial layer. And the problem with that is that you don't notice it until much later, and it delaminates, or it just, it does all sorts of screwy things. So I'm not jumping on it just yet. What I do is I use polyester as my grain filler, and I know that is cured because what we do when we spray polyester, we leave a little bit in a like a paper cup or disposable cup. That stuff's not as hard as a hockey puck. The next day, I know that something's wrong with it, and I'll remove it and take it and do it. But I don't have finished problems just because, but I would say that's probably the big impediment to me at this point, moving into UV.
Right. I mean, yeah, when it comes to sealers, when I was messing around with guitars and wood, I was taught to use an egg white
Oh,
an egg white filler, yeah, like an egg white filler, which was cheap, readily accessible, and
yes.
yeah, and I think it works well because I think Martin used to use it for their Koa guitars, was what few folks.
It was used extensively, I know, on finishing of lutes in the Renaissance and way up until probably the 17th and the 18th century. It was basically the foundation. Sometimes they would mix it with a little bit of pumice or a mineral to give it bulk, so it would kind of fill the grain. But it dries hard and it's a good sealer coat. It's absolutely clear, it doesn't yellow. And you can put, and then they would French polish over that. Yeah, I have heard of that. I have not done it. I just saw an Instagram post where a guy used a very, very old Brazilian, South American recipe of espresso coffee dust mixed with shellac as a pour filler.
Oh, right.
Well, I can't say or vouch for what it was like, but it sure probably smells good when you do it.
Yeah. Hopefully it won't be there won't be arguments over which kind of espresso ground you use.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. French roast or Italian.
Yeah, it give a different sound. Well, thank you very much for that. Maybe a quick run through. I see some guitars behind you.
Yes, I have. Let's see if I can get a little bit better shot there. I'll move out of the way. I've got 3 guitars behind me. I don't know how well you can see them. That first one is one of my new series called the Artist Series. That's a cutaway in maple, and that's a 4A grade, but absolutely very clean piece of. I'll actually bring it out.
Oh yeah.
One of the cleanest, nicest pieces of Adirondack spruce I've ever worked with.
Right. And now
This is just a really clean, and it's nice because I don't know if you can see, but it has that kind of that burnt sienna color, that sort of reddish brown colored grain, but it's very straight. And it's just, it's one of the nicest sounding guitars. It's maple, curly maple, and this is maple that I have a ton of. I had this in my shop for about 25 years. I originally was going to make a bunch of furniture out of it, but I found out that it makes a really good guitar wood. So this is that's a Florentine cutaway, which is what I like. So this is my signature series. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got little artists on the truss. And so this is a fingerstyle guitar. I basically just made, this is for a fingerstyle player. It's a soft V or modified V neck on it that transitions from being a V down here, and it transitions into a C shape up here, so that you have more of ability to plant your thumb in there and articulate there. And then very typical 2 1/4 inch bridge spacing, 2 1/4 fret spacing up here, 1 3/4 here, and just a little bit of bling. I put some Brazilian rosewood on the back.
Oh, nice.
And waverly, and then ebony fretboard and ebony. And then this is all ebony binding, which is absolutely a pain.
Gets everywhere.
To do that.
Right. Yeah.
In ebony. It's just, oh God, it's just so hard to work with ebony and to bend this. You know, you just plan on breaking most of the stuff that you want. But this is a beautiful guitar. I can't wait to get this in the hands of a really good fingerstyle player. And this has a 2-component urethane finish on it. So this is a good durable finish. And I just strung this up probably about 3 weeks ago. So what I do with all my guitars is I bring them home and I watch them for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, make sure that nothing weird is going to happen. like the bridge lift or God for say, something else. I get delaminate or something like that. And this will go off in, probably within a month or so to Diva.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.